Claire's screams pierced the night, raw and unraveling. But I stood still, a cold smile on my lips, knowing her world was crumbling. The secret I'd carried for months was finally free, and nothing would be the same. My name is Miles, owner of a small woodworking shop that keeps my hands busy and my head clear. 6 years ago, I married Claire, 33, a sharp-witted marketing director whose ambition lit up any room. We weren't perfect, but we were proud of what we'd built. I can still see us in that tiny rented kitchen, paint rollers in hand, laughing as we smeared yellow streaks on the walls, dreaming of a bigger place someday. That was before the night everything changed. It was a Friday, the kind where the air feels heavy with routine. I was in the garage, sanding down a cedar plank for a custom table, the hum of my tools drowning out the world. Claire and her friend Becca were out back, their voices carrying through the open window, slurred from too much wine. I wasn't trying to listen, but her words hit me like a sledgehammer. "Miles, that poor fool," she said, her tone dripping with mockery. "Busting his ass for our house fund, thinking it's his kid he'll be raising." Becca's laugh followed, sharp and cruel, egging her on. "Julian knows," Claire went on. "He's been all in from the start. Julian, her boss, married to Sarah, with a reputation for charm that never sat right with me." My hands froze on the wood, sawdust clinging to my skin. The world tilted, but something inside me snapped into focus. I didn't yell, didn't storm out. That's not how you win. Instead, I grabbed my phone, my fingers steady as I hit record, capturing every damning word. For 20 minutes, they laughed about their lunch break trysts, how Julian planned to ditch Sarah once Claire was pregnant, how I was too blind to see it. Each word carved deeper, but I stayed silent, letting the truth pile up like kindling. When they finally went inside, I sat there, staring at the cedar grain, my pulse hammering. The life I thought I had was a lie, and the woman I loved was betting on my ignorance. Part of me wanted to confront her, to watch her squirm, but I knew better. Rage doesn't win wars. Strategy does. I pocketed the phone and walked back into the house, kissing her cheek like nothing was wrong, asking about her day while she smiled that hollow smile. Inside, though, I felt something new, a cold, jagged resolve taking root. That night, I lay awake, replaying every moment I'd missed. The signs were there, glaring now that I looked. Claire had changed her phone password months ago, claiming it was work policy. She'd started coming home late, blaming client dinners or last-minute campaigns. Our credit card statements showed odd charges lunches at places she never mentioned, boutiques she didn't shop at. And her phone, always within reach now, clutched like a lifeline. She used to leave it on the counter, careless. Not anymore. I trusted her, chalked it up to stress, but now those details clicked into place, each one a brick in the wall she'd built between us. The next morning, I ordered a DNA test kit, having it shipped to my shop instead of the house. I started a hidden file on my laptop, logging every inconsistency, every late night, every vague excuse. It felt wrong, sneaking around behind the woman I had vowed to love, but what choice did I have? She turned our marriage into a battlefield, and I wasn't going to lose without a fight. Every time I looked at her, laughing over breakfast or scrolling through paint swatches for a dream home, I saw that smirk from the patio, heard her voice calling me a fool. It made my skin crawl, but it also fueled me. I wasn't sleeping much anymore. My days were split between the shop, where I could lose myself in the rhythm of carving, and the quiet hours piecing together her betrayal. The recording sat on my phone, a grenade I wasn't ready to pull the pin on. Not yet. Claire thought she was playing me, but she didn't know I was already rewriting the rules. I kept up the act, smiling, nodding, planning our future like the clueless husband she wanted me to be. But inside, I was building something else, a way out, a way to make her pay for every lie she thought she'd gotten away with. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the laughter, the way she and Becca cackled like I was nothing more than a punchline. That sound haunted me, looping in my head as I sanded wood or stared at the ceiling at night. But it also sharpened my focus. I wasn't going to let her win. Not like this. I had evidence, a plan forming, and time on my side. Claire had no idea what was coming, and that was the only thing keeping me sane. The days blurred into a haze of pretense, each one a tightrope walk over a chasm of betrayal. I woke up next to Claire, her soft breathing a mockery of the life we'd built, and forced a smile as she stirred. My heart was a furnace of rage and grief, but I buried it deep, playing the devoted husband while the recording of her laughter burned in my pocket. The world had shifted since that night in the garage, and I was no longer the man who trusted blindly. I was someone new, someone carving a path through her lies. Then came the evening that changed everything. Claire sat me down after dinner, her eyes bright with a practiced glow. She took my hands, her voice trembling just enough to seem real, and told me she was pregnant. 2 tests confirmed it, she said, beaming as she described our future as parents. I felt the air leave the room, my stomach twisting as her words landed. This was her endgame, the trap she'd laughed about with Becca. But I leaned in, hugged her tightly, and told her I was overjoyed, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "You'll be an incredible dad," she whispered, her fingers brushing my cheek. I nodded, but my eyes caught a flicker of something in hers: triumph, maybe, or a shadow of guilt. It didn't matter. I saw her now, clear as day. Alone in my shop later, the scent of cedar heavy in the air, I poured a whiskey and let the truth settle. Looking at her that night, imagining the life growing inside her, I felt no warmth, only a doubling of the betrayal. A child, innocent in all this, was being used as a pawn in her game with Julian. For a fleeting moment, I pitied that unborn life caught in her web. But pity passed, replaced by a cold clarity. Claire and Julian had built this mess, and I wouldn't let it bury me. I sipped the whiskey, the burn grounding me, and vowed to see this through. Her laughter echoed in my mind, fueling a resolve that felt both righteous and dark. Some nights I wavered. The weight of it all, the lies, the planning pressed down, and I wondered if I could just walk away, file for divorce quietly, and let her have her hollow victory. But then I'd remember her voice, calling me a fool, and Becca's cackle would ring in my ears. No, I couldn't let that stand. Not for pride, not for vengeance, but for the years of my life she'd planned to steal. I pushed the doubt aside, each memory of her scorn sharpening my focus. The next morning, I drove 2 towns over to meet Davenport, a divorce lawyer recommended by a client who'd been through his own war. I paid in cash, kept my name off the books, and laid out the basics. The recording, the pregnancy, the affair with Julian. Davenport listened, his face unreadable, then leaned forward. "You're smart to come now, before she suspects," he said. "Document everything: texts, receipts, timelines. Build a fortress of evidence." His words were a lifeline, a map through the chaos. I left his office lighter, my path clearer. Back home, I moved carefully like a man defusing a bomb. I opened a new bank account, transferring portions of my paycheck legally, bit by bit, to shield what was mine. I rented a small apartment under a friend's name, a fallback I hoped I'd never need, and leased a storage unit for my tools and keepsake photos of my dad, my first carving knife, things Claire couldn't touch. Each step felt like armor, protecting me from the fallout I knew was coming. But it also felt like war, a quiet battle I fought alone. The evidence piled up faster than I expected. Claire had left an old iPad in the guest room, forgotten but still synced to her messages. Late one night, I powered it on, my hands shaking as texts loaded flirty exchanges with Julian, vague plans for lunches that matched no work schedule she'd shared. I screenshotted everything, my chest tight with disgust. Our credit card statements told another story. Charges for hotels on days she claimed to be in meetings, dinners at restaurants she never mentioned. I cross-checked her calendar, her lies unraveling with every mismatch. One evening, I recorded her on a call, her voice low as she spoke to someone Julian I assumed about a weekend getaway she'd pitched to me as a work trip. The law allowed it, and I wasn't taking chances. The final piece came by accident. Driving past a cafe Claire swore she'd never been to, I spotted Julian's car parked nearby during her supposed office hours. I pulled over, snapped a photo, and checked the timestamp against her schedule. Another lie, another nail in her coffin. Each discovery fed my resolve, but also hollowed me out. This wasn't just about her affair, it was about the life she'd planned to chain me to, a lie I'd have lived forever if I hadn't overheard her. Living this double life was its own kind of hell. I smiled at Claire over breakfast, laughed at her stories, but every word felt like ash in my mouth. Sleep eluded me. My nights spent staring at the ceiling, torn between fury and a fleeting sorrow. Sometimes, watching her sleep, her face soft and unguarded, I'd feel a pang of what we'd had those kitchen painting days, now a lifetime ago. But then her laughter would creep back, and the sorrow burned away. I wasn't doing this for her, or even for me. I was doing it for the truth, for the man I refused to let her destroy. One night, as I locked up the shop, my phone buzzed with a text from Becca. "Congrats on the baby, Daddy-to-be," it read, her words dripping with the same smugness I'd heard on the patio. I stared at it, my grip tightening, and almost laughed. They thought I was their puppet, oblivious and pliable. But I was awake now, and the strings were mine to cut. I deleted the message, my plans solidifying. Claire and Julian had no idea what was coming, and that was my greatest weapon. The air in our house grew thicker with each passing day, heavy with secrets I carried and lies Claire spun. I moved through our routines like a ghost. My smiles mechanical, my words measured. The evidence I'd gathered sat locked in my shop, a ticking bomb I wasn't ready to detonate. But the clock was running, and every moment brought me closer to the edge. I felt it in my bones a storm was coming, and I was ready to stand in its center. One evening, Claire announced we'd be hosting dinner for Julian and his wife, Sarah. My stomach churned at the thought, but I nodded, playing the part of the oblivious husband. The night arrived, and our dining room filled with the clink of glasses and forced laughter. Julian sat across from me, his charm polished to a sheen, while Sarah seemed quieter, her eyes distant, as if she carried a weight she couldn't name. I caught Claire's glances at Julian, subtle but deliberate, a silent language I now understood. When she brushed his arm while passing the wine, I felt a surge of heat, my jaw tightening. I excused myself to the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face, staring at my reflection. Not yet, I told myself. The time wasn't right. I returned to the table, my mask firmly in place, but the sight of them together burned into me, sharpening my resolve. I needed allies, people who could see the truth without tipping my hand. The next day, I called Claire's parents, the Petersons, and asked to meet privately. At a quiet diner outside town, I sat across from them, my hands steady but my voice low. I played the recording from that night on the patio, showed them screenshots of texts, hotel receipts, and a photo of Julian's car. Their faces crumbled, Mr. Peterson's jaw clenched, his eyes hard, while Mrs. Peterson's hands trembled, tears spilling as she whispered an apology. Claire had changed, she said, her voice breaking. They felt betrayed, not just by her, but by the daughter they thought they knew. By the end, they were resolute, promising to stand by me. Their support felt like a lifeline, anchoring me as the plan took shape. The stage was set for Thanksgiving at the Petersons' house, a tradition filled with family and friends. I saw it as the perfect moment, a public reckoning Claire couldn't escape. The plan was simple but precise. Mrs. Peterson would steer the conversation toward grandchildren, as she always did, setting the trap. I drop a carefully worded comment about a health issue affecting my ability to have children, vague enough to spark panic, but not reveal my hand. Claire would unravel, I knew her well enough to predict it, and Julian would squirm. From there, I'd take control, laying out the truth with evidence that left no room for lies. Sarah would be there, invited quietly by Mrs. Peterson, her presence a silent hammer to Julian's facade. Every detail was mapped, every outcome considered. In the days leading up to the holiday, I dug deeper, ensuring my case was ironclad. One night, while Claire slept, I found a receipt tucked in her purse, a bar tab from a hotel lounge, dated for a day she'd claimed to be a conference. I added it to my file, each piece of brick in the wall I was building. Another evening, I overheard her on the phone, her voice hushed as she spoke to Julian about keeping things quiet until after the holidays. I recorded it, my pulse steady despite the betrayal. At the shop, I sorted through bank statements, finding more charges that didn't align with her story's small but damning, like breadcrumbs leading to her lies. The DNA kit sat unopened, a precaution for when the time came, its presence a reminder of the stakes. I met with Davenport again, laying out my plan for the confrontation. He reviewed my evidence, nodding approval, but urged caution. "Make sure it's airtight," he said. "She'll fight dirty when cornered." I left his office with a stack of draft divorce papers, their weight grounding me. Back at the house, I checked the storage unit, ensuring my tools and keepsakes were safe. The apartment I'd rented stood ready, a quiet refuge waiting for the aftermath. Every step felt like a chess move, calculated and deliberate, but the cost was etched in me: sleepless nights, a hollow ache where trust used to be. The night before Thanksgiving, I barely slept, my mind racing through the plan. I imagined Claire's face when the truth hit, Julian's composure cracking, Sarah's eyes meeting mine in sheer betrayal. Part of me dreaded the chaos, the raw pain it would unleash, but another part, colder, harder, craved it. They'd laughed at my expense, plotted to chain me to a lie. I wouldn't let that stand. I rose at dawn, the house silent, and stood in the kitchen where we'd once painted and dreamed. That life was gone, and I was ready to bury it. A small moment nearly broke me that morning. Claire, unaware of the storm, hummed as she packed a pie for the gathering, her hands brushing mine as she handed me a coffee. For a second, I saw the woman I'd loved, not the one who'd mocked me. But the memory of her laughter surged back, and I turned away, my resolve steel. At the shop, I double-checked my files, transferring backups to a secure drive. I slipped the DNA results preliminary, but damning into a folder with the recordings and receipts. Everything was ready. As we drove to the Petersons, Claire chattered about the holiday, oblivious to the blade hanging over her. I nodded, my thoughts elsewhere, picturing the moment it would all unravel. The house came into view, warm with lights and voices, but I felt no comfort. This wasn't a celebration, it was a battlefield. I carried my folder inside, its weight a silent promise. Sarah's car was already there. Her presence a signal the plan was in motion. Claire didn't notice, her laughter light as she greeted her family. I followed, my face calm, but inside I was coiled, ready to strike. The day stretched ahead, heavy with anticipation, and I knew nothing would be the same by nightfall. The Thanksgiving gathering at the Petersons' house started with a fragile warmth, voices overlapping in the glow of candlelight and clinking dishes. I sat among Claire's family, my folder of evidence tucked beneath my jacket, its weight a constant reminder of what was coming. Claire moved through the room with ease, laughing with her cousins, oblivious to the unraveling I'd set in motion. Sarah sat quietly near Julian, her face tight, as if she sensed something off. I caught her glance once, fleeting but heavy, and knew the moment was close. Mrs. Peterson steered the conversation as planned, her voice light as she asked about our plans for kids, her eyes flicking to me. The room stilled, forks pausing midair. I leaned forward, my tone casual but deliberate, and mentioned a recent doctor's visit hinting at a health issue that might affect my ability to have children. I said I'd need more tests to confirm. Claire's face drained of color, her glass trembling in her hand. Julian shifted in his seat, his jaw tight, avoiding my gaze. A murmur rippled through the table, but I held steady, watching the cracks form. The silence stretched, taut, and unbearable. Claire's eyes darted to Julian, a silent plea, but I didn't give her time to recover. I stood, my voice calm but firm, and said there was something more important everyone needed to know, especially her parents and Sarah. The room froze, all eyes on me. I pulled out the folder, placing it on the table, and opened with the DNA results preliminary but clear, proving the child wasn't mine. I played a brief clip from the patio recording, Claire's voice cutting through the air, mocking me as a fool who'd raise another man's child. Gasps followed, low and sharp. I set down screenshots of texts, hotel receipts, and a photo of Julian's car, each piece a hammer blow to their lies. Claire's reaction came fast, a burst of denial and rage. She leapt to her feet, her voice shrill as she accused me of fabricating it all, her hands shaking as she pointed at the papers. Julian tried to stay composed, his words smooth but hollow, claiming it was a misunderstanding. But Sarah's silence was louder than their protests. She stared at the DNA results, her fingers tracing the numbers, then looked at Julian, her eyes brimming with tears. Without a word, she shook her head, stood, and walked out, her footsteps echoing in the stunned quiet. That single act, more than any outburst, shattered their facade. Mr. Peterson rose, his face red with fury, and told Claire to stop lying, his voice booming as he gestured to the evidence. Mrs. Peterson buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly, her shoulders heaving. Claire's cousins exchanged glances, some turning away, others whispering in disbelief. The gathering collapsed into chaos, voices rising, chairs scraping, and Claire's pleas growing desperate. Julian slipped out after Sarah, his exit unnoticed by most, but not by me. I stood there, the eye of the storm, feeling neither triumph nor relief, just a hollow certainty that the truth was finally free. In the days that followed, I acted swiftly. Davenport filed the divorce papers, a stack of legal weight that felt like shedding chains. Claire's response was a flood of calls and texts, her voice swinging from venom to begging, accusing me of ruining her life. I recorded every message, replied only through my lawyer, and kept my distance. One night, she showed up at the shop, pounding on the locked door, her words slurred with wine and desperation. I watched from the shadows, my phone capturing it all, knowing it would strengthen my case for a restraining order later. Her unraveling was painful to witness, but I felt no pity, only the cold clarity of necessity. The fallout spread like wildfire. Mr. Peterson, unable to stomach his daughter's betrayal, contacted Claire's company, sharing enough to spark an internal investigation. Within days, Claire and Julian were suspended pending review, their careers teetering. Sarah moved faster, hiring a lawyer to freeze their joint assets and start divorce proceedings, her resolve a mirror of my own. I heard through a mutual friend that she'd confronted Julian at their home, her voice steady as she demanded he leave. The image lingered, a small spark of solidarity in the wreckage. Becca faced her own reckoning. I shared the patio recording with Marcus, her husband, one evening over coffee, letting him hear her laughter as she egged Claire on. His face hardened, and days later, he moved out, leaving Becca to face the consequences of her complicity. Their marriage hung by a thread, and I felt no guilt for exposing her role. Claire's family drew a line, their calls to her unanswered, their support redirected to me. Her cousins, once close, faded into silence, leaving her isolated in the ruins of her choices. One small moment stood out, a jolt I hadn't expected. At the grocery store, I ran into Sarah, her cart half full, her eyes tired but clear. She thanked me quietly for the truth, her voice steady despite the pain. "It wasn't your fault," she said, and I nodded, the weight of our shared betrayal unspoken but understood. We parted with a glance, two survivors of the same storm, and I drove home feeling lighter, as if her words had loosened something in me. The evidence I'd gathered held strong, a fortress Davenport praised as unassailable. Claire's attempts to twist the narrative claiming I'd driven her to it fell apart against the recordings and receipts. Julian's charm couldn't save him either, his reputation crumbling as whispers spread. The holidays' chaos had set off a chain reaction, and I watched it unfold from my new apartment, the bare walls a blank slate. I wasn't free yet, not entirely, but the storm had broken, and I stood on solid ground, ready for what came next. The dust settled slowly, like ash after a wildfire, leaving a quiet I hadn't felt in months. My new apartment was sparse, just a bed, a table, and my tools, but it was mine, free of Claire's shadow. The divorce papers were in motion, my evidence a steel wall that left her no leverage. The world she'd built on lies had collapsed, and I stood on the other side, scarred but unbroken. Yet the victory wasn't as sweet as I'd imagined. It came with a cost I was only beginning to understand. Claire's fall was swift and brutal. The company's investigation ended with her termination, her name tainted by misuse of time and resources. Job applications went unanswered, her reputation a stain no charm could erase. She sold her car, moved to a cramped studio apartment, and faced the reality of raising a child alone in financial strain. Davenport ensured the divorce favored me, her claims to my savings dismissed when the judge heard the recordings of her deceit. One night, she left a voicemail, her voice raw, accusing me of cruelty for exposing her. I saved it for the restraining order, my heart unmoved. She'd chosen her path, and I'd only held up a mirror. Julian fared no better. His suspension became a firing, the company citing damage to their image. Sarah's divorce proceedings stripped him bare, her lawyer relentless in securing her share of their assets. Whispers followed him, former colleagues turn away, his network dissolved. I heard he'd taken a low-level job out of state, a far cry from the corner office he'd once commanded. His charm, once a weapon, now rang hollow, and I felt a grim satisfaction knowing he'd lost as much as Claire. Becca's world cracked too. Marcus, after hearing her role in the scheme, filed for separation, unwilling to rebuild trust. She called me once, her voice shaking, begging to explain, but I cut her off, the memory of her laughter too sharp to forgive. Friends we'd shared drifted away from her, their loyalty shifting to those who valued truth. Her isolation mirrored Claire's, a consequence she hadn't foreseen when she cackled on that patio. The ripples didn't stop there. Claire tried to reach me, her attempts growing erratic. Late one evening, she appeared outside my shop, rain-soaked and shouting, claiming the pregnancy could still save us. I stayed inside, lights off, recording her outburst through the window until she left, defeated. Davenport used the footage to secure a restraining order, her desperation a final nail in her case. Another time, she sent a letter, handwritten and tear-stained, pleading for a second chance, swearing she'd made one mistake. I burned it in the shop's fire pit, the flames, consuming her words as I stared into the glow, feeling nothing but resolve. Some moments caught me off guard, stirring the embers of what I'd lost. At a client's house, delivering a finished table, I saw a family photo, parents laughing with a toddler, and felt a pang for the future I'd once imagined. Not with Claire, but with someone honest, someone real. I pushed it down, focusing on the grain of the wood, but it lingered, a quiet ache for what might have been. Another day, Mr. Peterson called, his voice heavy, thanking me for sparing their family further shame. He apologized again, and I heard the weight of a father's grief. I told him I held no grudge, and we hung up, both of us carrying our own scars. Reflecting on it all, I saw the price of my choices. I'd won, yes, but the fight had hardened me, chipped away at the man who'd once painted a kitchen with Claire, laughing without care. Trust felt like a foreign language now, its syllables lost in the wreckage. I didn't regret exposing her. Silence would have let her poison others, maybe another man like me. But I mourned the part of myself that believed in forever, the part that died with her laughter. Some friends called my actions harsh, urging me to handle it privately, but I stood firm. Claire had planned to steal my life, my future, my truth. Letting her walk away unscathed would have been a betrayal of myself. The lessons sank deep. Trust is fragile, honesty non-negotiable, and actions carry weight no one escapes. I learned to stand taller, to guard my worth, but also that peace doesn't come from vengeance. It comes from letting go, from building something new on the ashes of what was. I wasn't there yet, but I was closer, step by careful step. My shop became my refuge, the hum of saws and scent of wood pulling me back to life. Orders poured in a dining set for a young couple, a bookshelf for a teacher, each project a reminder of what I could create. Business grew, my hands steady as I carved, finding joy in the work that had always grounded me. I started seeing a therapist, a quiet woman who listened as I unpacked the anger and grief. It wasn't easy, but it helped, like sanding rough edges until the surface felt true. I opened up slowly, joining friends for coffee, laughing at small things again. Isla, Davenport's paralegal, became a familiar face, her sharp wit and steady presence a contrast to the chaos I'd known. We talked over case updates, her professionalism never wavering, but I caught myself noticing her kindness, the way she saw through my guarded walls. I didn't rush it, trust needed time, and I was learning to give myself that. But the possibility of something new, built on truth, felt like a seed planted in fresh soil. One morning, I stood in my shop, sunlight streaming through the window, a half-finished table before me. I ran my hand along its edge, feeling the grain, and looked out at the street, alive with passing cars and distant voices. The past was there, a shadow I'd always carry, but it no longer held me. I'd faced Claire's betrayal, torn down her lies, and walked away whole. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape. I picked up my chisel, the weight familiar, and started carving again, each stroke a promise to keep going, to find peace in the life I was rebuilding, one steady piece at a time.